Welcome to the deep dive. We are taking a look at a rather remarkable stack of sources today.
We really are. It's quite a collection.
Yeah, primarily centering on excerpts from a philosophical narrative. It's titled The Lake as Witness Finding Alignment in the Finite.
Such a powerful title.
Right. And the mission for our deep dive today is to explore a concept that feels, increasingly urgent.
Oh, absolutely.
It's about how abandoning our polished digital personas and letting go of our tight grip on narrative control might actually be the mechanism that frees us from modern ambient anxiety.
Which is something you, the listener, are probably feeling right now. We all are.
We really are. So to get us there, we're looking at a story set in a place called Dayface.
And it's important to note this isn't just a physical location in the narrative.
No, it functions almost mythologically, like a threshold.
Right.
It's a retreat completely stripped of the noise, the algorithms, the constant feedback loops we are all so accustomed to.
A total reset.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we are following three travelers. They're referred to as the nephew, Roger, and the uncle.
Three very distinct perspectives.
Very. And they rise before dawn with the explicit goal of aligning themselves with the natural world.
And the core thesis we are pulling from their journey is about radical honesty.
Yes, it's about utilizing our own conscience as an uncompromising inner filter.
To prioritize clarity over beautification.
What's fascinating here is how this narrative completely inverts our modern defaults.
Oh, it completely flips them.
Right, because we operate in an environment where beautification is not just a preference, it is a prerequisite.
Yeah, we constantly curate our output.
We do. And we are highly aware of this, of course.
I know you, the listener, you know exactly how much cognitive load goes into managing the avatar of yourself you present.
To your professional network.
Your social circles.
Even your family.
Exactly. But this text suggests that this constant curation doesn't just mask our true selves. It actually creates dense internal obstructions.
It clogs us up.
It really does. And the narrative positions the removal of these obstructions, the cessation of the performance, as the only genuine path to psychological freedom.
It is a striking premise.
Truly.
So we join these travelers in the late morning at Dayface.
The environment is described with this incredible crisp brightness.
Yeah, there's no mist, no atmospheric ambiguity.
Total clarity.
And the three of them return to a still lake. But they don't sit together to chat or analyze the view.
No, they spread out along the shore in total solitude.
And the lake itself is described not as a void, but as an attentive presence.
Attentive. I love that word choice.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
The nephew is standing there, holding a small stone.
He is looking into this vast, still water.
And he begins to evaluate what the text refers to as a well within himself.
This well represents his internal reservoir.
Right. He starts asking himself these heavy surgical questions.
Like, what have I thrown into myself over the years?
Yes. Which words stayed? Which wounds fermented?
And the interesting thing is he isn't trying to journal his way out of it.
Or solve it. He simply drops the stone into the water.
The physical act of dropping the stone serves as a powerful anchor for the abstraction he is dealing with.
Because the ripples move outward.
They disrupt the surface.
And eventually vanish from sight.
And the nephew watches this and realizes the sheer weight of consequence. Every word, every seemingly private decision operates exactly like that stone.
The narrative delivers this vital observation right here. It says, and the lake keeps record.
That is a profound way of looking at the legacy of our actions.
A stone dropped in a lake doesn't just disappear.
No, it alters the displacement of the water permanently, even if the surface looks calm again.
Every action leaves a trace in memory.
In the nervous systems of the people around us.
And in the broader structural reality of our lives.
You might repress a memory or delete a post, assuming the ripple is gone.
But the universe, the lake, has already recorded the impact.
Which makes the experience of the second traveler, Roger, incredibly resonant.
Oh, Roger. Roger is the architect of the group.
He is a systems thinker, a data analyst.
He navigates the world through metrics, cause and effect, tangible outcomes.
He represents the dominant paradigm of our modern economy.
Totally. But standing at the edge of this lake, he is stripped of all his usual instruments.
The lake offers 0 data points.
It does not care about his KPIs.
Or his published articles.
Or the professional applause he has accumulated.
Roger realizes the lake only records raw inputs. Tone, intention, and structural integrity.
And this realization leads to what we might call an escape from the tyranny of metrics.
Right, because in our current culture, we largely equate measurement with value.
If something cannot be quantified, your sleep, your daily steps, your productivity,
We're influenced.
exactly, it is treated as if it doesn't exist.
And you, the listener, know the crushing psychological weight of this constant measurement.
It's exhausting.
So when Roger stands before a witness that fundamentally refuses to quantify him, he feels a profound sense of being unmeasured.
And crucially, the text points out that his reaction isn't existential dread.
No, it is absolute relief.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second, though.
Go for it.
I understand the relief of stepping away from the spreadsheet, but we live in a reality that requires measurement.
True.
You can't run a hospital, manage a supply chain, or sustain a livelihood without metrics.
You really can't.
So how does the narrative reconcile Roger's relief at being unmeasured with the very real survival requirement of keeping score in modern society?
It's an essential distinction to make. The text isn't arguing that metrics are inherently evil or useless for logistics.
Okay.
The danger arises when we allow those external metrics to measure our inherent worth.
Ah, I see.
Roger's relief comes from discovering an unmeasured space within himself. He realizes that while his output can be quantified by society, his underlying integrity cannot be graded on a curve.
Right.
By consciously creating and visiting these unmeasured spaces, whether literally in nature or internally through reflection, we decouple our identity from our productivity.
That is the only way someone like Roger can return to his systems without being consumed by them.
Exactly. That makes perfect sense. It is about decoupling the self from the data.
And this brings us to the uncle.
The elder of the group.
Sitting quietly by the reeds, he possesses a calm that the other two are still trying to earn.
He understands the mechanics of this unmeasured space.
The uncle observes that the lake does not accuse.
Nor does it flatter.
It merely reflects light. And he offers this framework. To live before a witness is to live carefully, but not fearfully.
The linguistic pivot there is crucial.
How so?
To live fearfully is to live defensively. It is the posture of someone terrified of being canceled, judged, or found lacking by an audience.
It requires a constant, exhausting management of optics.
Exactly. To live carefully, however, is a posture of deep respect.
It implies intentionality.
In taking ownership of your ripples. The lake doesn't have an agenda, so there's nothing to fear.
But because it records everything perfectly, you must be awake to your own actions.
This transitions seamlessly into a really engaging dialogue between the travelers later that morning.
Yeah, the nephew approaches the uncle and poses a rather blunt question.
He asks if this idea of the lake as a witness is symbolic or if it is real.
And the uncle replies simply, both.
Both. On a symbolic level, it is a psychological tool.
The discipline of living as if you are accountable to something larger and more permanent than your immediate social circle.
But realistically, it acknowledges the physical reality we just discussed.
The undeniable permanence of consequence.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the exact moment the nephew's paradigm shifts.
Right. Earlier, the text implies he was using the water as a mirror.
Perhaps looking for his own flaws, agonizing over his imperfections.
But the narrative points out a deliberate shift in his gaze.
He stops looking for his own flaws in the reflection and begins searching for alignment.
He moves from the narcissistic anxiety of, how am I being perceived?
To the grounded responsibility of, is my posture true to my environment?
And Roger, keeping true to his analytical nature, takes this philosophical shift and maps it directly onto systems theory.
I love this part.
He watches the water and observes a system collapses when no one feels accountable to the whole. Perhaps human beings collapse the same way.
This is a brilliant synthesis.
He is applying the mechanics of structural failure to human morality.
It is a devastatingly accurate analogy. Think about organizational decay.
Yeah.
A company, a government, or a community doesn't usually fail because of one massive external blow.
It fails through 1,000 tiny abdications of duty.
Individuals stop believing that their specific ripples matter to the broader lake.
They hoard resources, they cut corners, they focus only on their immediate optics.
Roger is suggesting that human psychology mirrors this perfectly.
If you lose your internal accountability, if you stop tending to you experience a psychological collapse.
You fragment.
The uncle confirms this. He points out that this is precisely the function of the conscience.
The conscience isn't a mechanism for guilt.
It is a mechanism for structural integrity.
It is why clearing the well is not a luxury, but a necessity.
The morning concludes with the three of them standing together. They aren't debating philosophy anymore.
The text observes a shift in the atmosphere from intellectual noise to silent, demanding awareness.
They are embodying the concept.
They have crossed the threshold. It is one thing to read about accountability.
It is another to stand silently beside other people.
Knowing you are all equally exposed to an environment that cannot be charmed, debated, or manipulated.
As the narrative moves into the afternoon of day 2, the physical light changes and the conceptual framework deepens.
The shadows stretch out across the shore.
The nephew observes the trees and remarks that in this light, they don't look like solid shapes anymore.
They look like lines reaching outward.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
The uncle uses this observation to make a profound physical demonstration.
He takes his walking cane and draws a single, finite, straight line in the sand.
He points to it and states, "A human being is like this,
He is defining humanity by its strict limitations.
bounded by a beginning and an end."
And, predictably, Roger's modern conditioning flares up.
He crouches by the line and argues. In mathematics, a line extends infinitely.
Roger is voicing the core dogma of our era.
The obsession with infinite scalability.
We are conditioned to believe that boundaries are insults to our potential.
We want infinite growth in our markets.
Infinite reach on our platform.
Infinite time to achieve our goals.
But the uncle meets this resistance with a quiet, grounding truth.
He says, on paper, yes. In life, no.
I want to pause on that friction because it's so central to the modern experience.
It really is.
We build these vast, theoretically infinite lives on paper.
On our resumes, our 5-year plans, our social media architecture.
But in life, we are radically bounded.
We are limited by our biology, our energy, and our time.
The nephew hears this and admits a vulnerability that I think most of you listening will immediately recognize.
He admits that he fears limitation because it feels like smallness.
He equates being finite with being insignificant.
It is the natural byproduct of living in a globally connected world.
When you can see the achievements of 8 billion other people in real time, your own finite capabilities feel microscopic.
But the uncle offers a reframe that completely dismantles this anxiety.
He tells the nephew limitation is not smallness, it is clarity.
This is perhaps the most critical framework in the entire text.
It fundamentally changes how we view our own constraints.
It really does.
But let me push back again on behalf of anyone who might hear that and think it sounds a bit like giving up.
Okay.
If we accept that our line is strictly finite, don't we risk settling?
That's the fear, isn't it?
Doesn't accepting limitation breed complacency in a world that requires ambition just to keep the lights on?
It is a fair question, but it misunderstands the physics of ambition.
How so?
The uncle addresses this directly using a structural analogy that Roger, the systems guy, instantly understands.
The river analogy.
Yes. The uncle talks about a river. Without banks, a river doesn't become an infinitely powerful ocean.
It becomes a destructive, shallow flood.
And eventually a stagnant swamp.
Structure requires limits.
The boundaries of the banks are exactly what give the water its kinetic energy.
They give it a vector.
If you refuse to accept your finite edges, your energy just dissipates into the environment.
You become exhausted trying to be everything to everyone.
Accepting your limitations provides the clarity to channel your finite energy into a forceful, directed current.
That distinction between a flood and a current is incredibly helpful.
It is the difference between anxiety and momentum.
And this realization naturally prompts the nephew to ask the ultimate operational question.
He looks at his own hands, acknowledging his physical limits.
And asks, but if I am just a line, what gives direction?
The uncle answers immediately with one word.
Intention.
This raises an important question about exactly what we are orienting ourselves toward.
To illustrate, the uncle lifts his cane from the sand and points it toward the horizon across the lake.
He notes that the horizon is also a line.
But it is one that serves as an asymptote.
It is a line you can walk toward forever but never fully reach.
In this framework, the horizon represents meaning.
We are limited lines, but we find our purpose by walking toward an apparent infinity.
The uncle corrects the group's perspective. It isn't about how long your line is.
It is entirely about where your line is pointing.
This realization completely shatters the toxicity of comparison.
The nephew reflects on how much of his life has been spent side-eyeing the lines of other people.
He has been constantly agonizing over whether his line is shorter or less visible or less impressive than his peers.
We all do this.
We measure our career trajectories, our milestones, against an aggregated highlight reel of everyone we know.
But the nephew realizes that this comparative math is fundamentally distorted.
Because comparison alters your geometry.
The uncle formalizes this with a piece of advice that serves as a brilliant operational principle.
He says, When a line tries to be another line, it forgets its own course.
If you are a finite vector and you expend your limited energy trying to bend your trajectory to mimic the angle of the person next to you, you will entirely miss your own destination.
You abandon your own intention to borrow someone else's.
It is the ultimate systemic failure of the individual.
The narrative then guides us to the closing moments of day 2.
The travelers are standing shoulder to shoulder, facing that horizon.
The wind dies down, and the lake perfectly mirrors the sky above it.
The text describes this reflection not merely as an optical illusion, but as a meeting point.
The separation between the finite earth and the infinite sky seems to dissolve.
It is a synthesis of everything they have wrestled with over the 2 days.
They have stopped performing.
They have accepted the terrifying, clarifying reality of their own limitations.
And they've recognized that their value lies in their trajectory, not their length.
And the uncle lets one final observation hang in the air as the sun begins to set.
He says, "A human being is a limited line. But when directed toward meaning, even a short line touches eternity."
The text notes that no one offered a rebuttal or an analysis of this statement.
Some truths shouldn't be immediately dissected into data points.
They just need to be walked.
The horizon, which to a modern anxious mind might seem like a daunting, unreachable metric, suddenly feels like a quiet invitation.
It is the ultimate resolution to the tension between the finite and the infinite.
We cannot control the length of our line,
We cannot control the external disruptions that might truncate it.
but the intention behind our actions, the meaning we orient ourselves toward, possesses infinite resonance.
It touches eternity because the ripples of a life lived with careful, unmeasured integrity continue to expand long after the initial stone has vanished beneath the surface.
So what does this all mean?
If we synthesize this journey at Dieface,
We started by confronting the exhausting reality of our curated lives.
we explored the lake as an unbiased witness.
A mechanism that aggressively ignores our resumes and social metrics, choosing instead to record the raw data of our integrity and our hidden intentions.
We navigated the initial panic and then the profound relief of stepping into an unmeasured space.
Realizing that decoupling our worth from our productivity is essential for psychological survival.
We reframed the fear of our own limitations.
Discovering that being finite isn't a tragic flaw, but the very riverbank that gives our lives kinetic energy and focus.
And finally, we arrived at the mechanics of intention.
Recognizing that mimicking the trajectory of others fundamentally corrupts our own course.
For you, the listener, the practical application of this text is both incredibly challenging and deeply liberating.
It challenges the assumption that your modern anxiety can be solved by simply optimizing your routine or finding a better productivity hack.
The text argues that true relief requires something far more radical.
The willingness to locate your own unmeasured space.
It is the practice of occasionally stripping away the metrics and sitting before your own conscience.
Prioritizing structural integrity over external beautification.
When you stop expending all your finite energy trying to artificially lengthen your line or bend it to match the horizon of someone else, you finally have the resources to walk your own course.
It certainly changes the texture of how you approach your ambitions tomorrow morning.
It really does.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought to mull over as you step back into the noise of your week.
The text establishes that while our lines are strictly finite and bounded by circumstance, it is our intention that gives them direction toward meaning.
If intention is the only thing that truly determines where your finite line is pointing right now, what happens to your trajectory? If your underlying intention has secretly been driven by a fear of being unmeasured, rather than a desire for genuine alignment.
If you were to completely strip away the fear of not having enough data, enough metrics, or enough applause to prove you exist, where would your line point then?
That is the real work, isn't it?
Discovering what actually remains when the applause stops and the metrics drop to zero.
A question worth keeping in mind the next time you look at your own reflection. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We will catch you next time.